welcome to the Circus of Crazy, also known as the world. I'm your ringmaster, GalaxyOfInk, and today we're going to talk a little bit about Harriet Tubman. So February was Black History Month, in case anybody doesn't have the internet and isn't watching this, and also just is completely unaware to any sort of social standing at all in the world. February is Black History Month. I know I didn't get the chance really to celebrate it too much. My February was absolutely packed, and well, March is going to be too, but March is Women's Month, and right now, when I'm recording, the 8th is International Women's Day. So today, I'm going to combine a little bit of those, and I'm going to tell you some things that we know about Harriet Tubman. So Harriet Tubman was a slave woman during the times before the Civil War in America, and using the system called the Underground Railroad, she led over 300 slaves, former slaves, to freedom, mostly up in Canada, right after the Fugitive Slave Act was enacted in the North, which made it so that even if a slave had escaped to the North, which was not actively practicing slavery at the time, they still had to be returned down to the South if they were discovered. So after that point, she started sending people back up to Canada all the way, traveling from I think she was traveling from Virginia, I believe, all the way up to Canada and making these trips that were highly dangerous for her back and forth. So for those of you who don't know, non-American watchers, and also American watchers, because this is something that we don't really talk about too much in school, the Underground Railroad was not how we picture it. I think sometimes, at least I know how I was taught it, it was like this coordinated system of lights and sounds and actions, and everybody had this secret list that they all read off of, and you got to Joe's house, and then Joe would lead you down to Sally's house. It's 2 houses down to the left. In reality, it's not like that at all. Also, I think kind of naturally, as with sadly and annoyingly everything, we tend to think of the Underground Railroad as being a lot of courageous white, mostly men, who joined the valiant cause of abolition, and again, it's not like that. There was a lot of Quakers who were doing it because the Quaker religion at the time was against slavery, but most of it was freed slaves. I think that should have been obvious that that was the case, but, it's not sometimes taught to us like that, and it was not a very coordinated thing. There was this system of sort of lighting or very subtle things to let people know that this was a safe house, but aside from that, there was no directions on where you could go to, which places would be open, because say you found one place and you're making a return trip back, say you found one place that used to be open, well, now that person has moved, or that person, they deem themselves too close to someone who might report them, or it's too dangerous for you now, and so they can't do it anymore. That area is shut down now, so it's all uncoordinated. So when Harriet Tubman is making these 19 or 20 trips that she made back and forth, it's all a loose system that she has set out, that was subject to change at any and all given moments. So that's insane. So we all know how horrible slavery is. I think I think that we have a tendency to usually just acknowledge it and then say, okay, slavery is bad, it's not happening anymore now, so slavery is bad, the end, close the book. And that's not at all how it is, and nor, I think, at all how it should be discussed, because that's just not the truth. This country has a lasting effect of not resolving things that should be done for minorities in this country, or those who are underrepresented and being, unfairly treated in this country. We have a history of brushing struggles that still exist today under the rug, and we also have a history, I think, of saying that the story is closed on that chapter of hardships for them when it is clearly not. I think we do that a lot with every single minority group, and I think it's important to recognize why I love history so much. I think I talked about this a little bit in the Charlottesville video that I made, but I think why I love history so much is that it tells us a lot. going back to certain things. And one thing that we have to remember, I think, is that as much as it was 200 years ago, we now have a lot more information about how people work, how people think, things like that. And we should be applying those to the past. We should be applying those thoughts to the past and what has happened in the past, how it affects our future and how it affects us today. And slavery today still has a horrible lasting effect on our entire country. And we still see that all the time. We saw that this summer. But that's why it's so important to remember, I think, those that fought against it. And it's important to honor those people, because those are the people that we should be looking up to, that should be on pedestals, which is, why I'm very, very happy that Harriet Tubman's going to be on the $20 bill soon, which is going to be great. I think it's happening 2020, like, around from this year even down to, like, 2020. I think it's sometime in that time frame that she's going to be on there. But as we hear that headline, also remember that Andrew Jackson, the one who murdered a ton of Native Americans, he's not being taken off the $20 bill. He's just going to be moved to the back and going to be a lot smaller. So that's kind of despicable. But, so back to actually Harriet Tubman. She was absolutely amazing. So this woman, put in context, she escapes from this town, which first thing, this plantation that she was working on, she escapes from that, which already is a feat in of its own. And then after doing that, she goes back and gets more people, gets her family and things like that. And that's an insane decision to make, an insane moral decision to make, and the skill that she had to pull this off and never get caught for it. She never got caught in her trip. She never, it didn't end with 19 because she got caught or something bad happened to her. It ended with 19 because that's when the Civil War broke out, and it was a lot, everything was getting a little bit dicier, and she got promoted, in a sense. So, as she does all of this, there are just some fun facts and fun stories about her. She carried a gun with her, which, was just... Also put in context, yes, she is a black woman at this time, so you have the institution of slavery that's going on, which is putting her in the lowest rung of society at the time, and she's also a woman, so that's also putting her... This is a time when pants for women were not an available option, and we'll get into her pants a little bit later, but, so she's just a badass all around. So she carried a gun with her because she wouldn't let anybody, when she took them on the route, she wouldn't let anybody turn back, because if they did, they'd probably lead them to, like, her and to her route, because they'd have to know the route to get back already, so she could not risk people going back. So she said she carried the gun around with her because if you were going to flee, she would shoot you herself to do it. I don't know if she ever fired the gun, but that's the thing she did. She gave babies heroin. I think it was, I think it's heroin, officially, to keep them quiet during the trip, and you know what? It worked. It worked, and you do what you have to do sometimes, because, like, I mean, you gotta think, like, so this is this amazing thing that she's doing back and forth, an insanely dangerous trip, they have to be very, very quiet. There are people after them. To even decide to bring a baby along is kind of an insane thing, but you gotta keep that baby quiet. I mean... You gotta keep the baby quiet. There's really no way around it. If you're bringing that baby around, the baby has gotta stay quiet under all circumstances. And you know what? I don't think she killed them, so I'm okay with that. Okay, so eventually the Union discovers basically, like, what she's been doing this entire time, and as the Civil War breaks out, they recruit her as a spy over to the South to try and get some stuff done. And she ends up leading this raid on this specific barn. I think it was Pennsylvania or Virginia. I forget where. Or maybe it was Missouri. I'm really bad at places, by the way. Just if anyone doesn't know, I love history very, very much. I'm really bad at locations. Geography, I'm bad at geography. But, so she leads this huge raid, by informing, like, certain slaves, like, in plantations along this one river route that they were going to be coming, like, as she's spying. And, basically, as the Union Army arrives, the slaves at each of the plantations revolt in of themselves, and, they overtake their own plantations and hand them over to the Union, and she frees like 300 slaves, like just in that one night, like alone, her, like that is absolutely insane, and I love it so much. Like, she just organized this entire like huge raid of people, like all the time. Like, that is amazing. So she was the first, I forget what it was. So I just figured out what it was because I was Googling all of this. So she was the first armed woman to lead an assault in the Civil War, which is, again, absolutely nuts. Still completely insane. And also she did it on the banks of it was the Combahee River, and that was where she was doing it. And the Combahee River, you know, actually, that is a very important spot to me. That's where John Lawrence died. And oh, my boy would be so proud. I love John Lawrence so much. I'm gonna write a book. Like, if I ever write a book, yeah, that's gonna be the first one. It's gonna be the biography of John Lawrence, because he stinking deserves a biography. So that's where she led that, and that's just like, that is so nice to me, like, such a nice turning point. Like, John Lawrence would be so stinking proud watching that. Oh, I love it so much. Also, during that raid, she asked if she could wear pants, because women, like, were not allowed to wear pants. Like, strictly, like, rule and law, were not allowed to wear pants. Like, she was the first woman leading an armed assault. Like, she was leading an armed assault, and she had to petition to wear pants. Okay, so quickly, like, to round off her life, by the time that all this gets over with, she doesn't, like, take a government position or anything, we kind of know that, but she wanted to start a home for those people who couldn't, like, for, like, the elderly and for the disabled and stuff like that, specifically for Black elderly and Black disabled people, to help them out. And she did it, and I forget what it is, I think it's just, like, called Tubman's Home or something like that. And she stays there, and she lives there, and she dies there. But, you know, as she's doing all that, she's not receiving any federal aid for what she's done. She's not receiving her paycheck, even though she was the, again, first armed woman to lead an assault in the Civil War and freed 700 slaves. And that was an important, the Combahee River is an important river for the Union to have captured. Like, she wasn't receiving anything. Like, she wasn't getting, like, her, like, due pension or due money from the federal government. So a ton of people, like, banded together to get her, like, to get her this home and to get her just, like, basic necessities. Like, literally, she was on that. And that's a good rounding out, like, no matter what we do, we look back at these people and we honor them, but we have to remember, in the time that they were alive, they were not given their due rights. They were not given their due process. And that's why it is so important to remember these types of people, because I especially think, you know, I mean, it's so funny that she's replacing Jackson on the 20, right? Because he's the exact opposite of her in all of this. You know, Andrew Jackson was a brutal monster, and in his time, he was revered as a great strong man of a president, and there are still people who revere him as that today. We still see that today. And so even 200 years later, he is getting his due rights as being the strong man who led the nation across to the other side of the continent. And he was an utter monster. And he doesn't deserve that. He doesn't deserve to get that sort of praise. Whereas Harriet Tubman, who freed, you know, what, that equals to, like, 10,000 slaves, like, in her lifetime, freed them, and did great things to help the Union win the war, was an abolitionist in her own right, you know, a strong Black woman who paved the way for a lot of things to happen, rightly so, that should have in America, and she still does not get the due process that she deserves. So I think that's kind of the antithesis of both Black History Month and Women's Month, and that's kind of like, that's kind of one of the examples that I like to bring up when people ask, stupidly, I have to say stupidly, like, oh, why do we still have a Black History Month? You know, why do we still have a, like, Women's Month? Like, everyone's equal now. Or, no, they're not. And because we still don't look at people as being equal, even in history. Like, we don't give due process to the actions of people that happened in the past. We, I think, unquestionably, give these people, you know, you have people, all of them, like, and Thomas Jefferson, I have to say, I've got a lot of thoughts about Thomas Jefferson, but he was a scumbag, and he doesn't deserve all the praise that he gets. He does not deserve the monument that sits across from Martin Luther King Jr.'s. He just doesn't deserve it, like, flat out. Not only for slavery, by the way, but, you know, big reason for slavery. I could get into him another whole time, but that's, you know, we have all these examples, and it's just so interesting to me. And for those who don't know, who haven't been to D.C., there is, the monument of Thomas Jefferson sits across the river from the monument of Martin Luther King Jr. And, oof, it blows my mind sometimes. You know, it's just such an odd thing, that you have someone who fought for the freedom of their people, and suffered through hardships, and then you have Thomas Jefferson, and, you know, it's rough. It really does bug me. It really does bother me a shit ton. But for that's why we still have Black History Month. And it's important, and I don't think we should ever get rid of it. It's very, very important, and that's why we still have Women's Month, too, because, you know, there is no, I don't think there is a specific memorial. Besides statues, I don't think that there's a memorial for a woman in D.C. But there is one for Thomas Jefferson, because he was really great with women. You know, never mistreated anybody. Another video! But that's going to be all for today's video. You can click right here to subscribe. You can click right here for my video about Charlottesville that I mentioned earlier. You can click down below to like or comment. Thanks. Bye!